Today we're going to go game by game, matchup by matchup for the Week 18 slate to help you get by through this championship Sunday for fantasy football if you got an extra week. We're going to identify those must-start players, those sneaky start players, everybody in between. We're going to be looking at these matchups, trying to predict the game script to see what you want to do with these players. And this is going to be a hard week to do it. We got a lot of injuries. It's week 18. There's going to be a lot of players that are sitting. I identified some as I went through the matchups. However, we're going to get more news as we roll into Friday and Saturday. So be on the lookout for that. I'll have that listed in the comments, pinned, as I find that out with the news. Also, if you hear anything, drop that in the comments. Help somebody out. But make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. You need to click that because I'm going to be a key resource to your research next year. Come August and September, if you click that subscribe button, you start searching for stuff about players you want to draft, I'm going to come up. You're going to see the information, and we're talking ball on these players, the values, the advanced metrics, what we've seen in training camp. We're talking about the rookies all off season long, and then you'll be able to jump in, get the information you need, and it'll help you with your drafts. Click that button, stop missing out. But let's look at Week 18 here because this is going to be a hard week to predict and look up things, but we're going to do our best here. Steelers at the Ravens. We're going to start things off with a 35 over-under. That is low. That's a low-scoring matchup here. Vegas saying, hey, you may want to stay away for fantasy production. And it makes sense here because we're going to have some guys out in this contest. Spread's kind of tight here. But looking at this, Zay Flowers and OBJ outs. Gus Edwards, touchdown upside. We do not know the touch distribution here. Rashad Bateman and Nelson Aguilar could be getting looks here in this matchup. Really depends on how much you're hurting. Really does. Nelson Aguilar has been known to get some air yards. Rashad Bateman has been ramping up from that Liz Frank injury, and he has been showing some progress. Not enough to score in a box score for us in fantasy. That being said, we're looking at him more after his rookie contract with his team. And for this year, gamble. Big-time gamble with Ravens right now. Even Justice Hill, if you want to look at that. But run-back players, you're looking at George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. George Pickens has been hot over these last few weeks as we got the quarterback change. Deontay Johnson's been on the down. They like to take turns, it seems like, of the wide receiver you want in fantasy. But right now, George Pickens is the guy who's hot. Najee Harris versus Jaylen Warren. You're going to have to pick your poison if you're going with those two running backs because if you're looking at one game in a phone booth here, you're really not knowing who's going to outproduce the other. You may guess, you may get it right, but you're not going to put your life on it. That being said, this is a game that if you're creating stacks for DFS, you don't want to touch unless you're trying to be contrarian and trying to hit big with like a Rashad Bateman, maybe some run backs with a George Pickens, and you're hoping something breaks. That's what you're doing, especially when you see a 35 over-under. You know the fish are not running to that, so you might be able to get some contrarian options from this game. Texans at the Colts, 47.5 over-under. And with this game script that we're looking at here, this one could break because the Colts, we know they get in weird game scripts where teams can score fantasy points on them and allowing them to score fantasy points as well. And the Texans, we know what CJ Stroud can do. He pushes it downfield. That being said, Nico Collins, 7 targets in his last 2 games. He's getting targets. He's getting air yards. Noah Brown's out. Tank Dell's definitely not going to be there. He's on IR. There's not much competition for targets. And even when he's just the guy, they're still going to chuck it to him. We have a history of that. 7 targets in his last 2 games. He's a bona fide stud wide receiver for fantasy football with that workload. That being said, too, Devin Singletary getting a 68% opportunity share over his last 4 games. So he is getting workload as well. You may want to play the matchups with that against the Colts. This is a defense where you want to use your running backs. Run backs, your usual players here. Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, your big-time players. Again, players being sat, players getting limited workload. It's going to be hard to project. Watch the news. watch the news because we do have some veterans in here that could see that. That being said, a lot of these players are still trying to finish the year strong. Falcons at the Saints, 42 over under, a lower over under. However, we're going to have a weird game script here. We got some injuries to look at, and that's going to make things kind of weird. Alvin Kamara, odds are saying he might be out. He hasn't been practicing. We'll see here this afternoon for the Friday practice reports, see what's going on with him. By the time you watch this video, you might already know or have a good idea. Jamal Williams might be stepping up here, getting the workload and opportunity. I'm going to have a You Need video out for that, for the You Need series, to see whether or not you need him for fantasy football. Probably at least as a guy stashed on the back end of your bench. But Chris Olave, we got to see if he's going to be on the field. That being said, it could be a Rashid Shaheed moment, but he produces like once out of every 5 games. He usually either gives you nothing mostly or a big-time performance, and that's how he rolls. He's a Rochambeau type of player. Hopefully you missed the nuts here, but run backs, Bijan Robinson, you can't always trust him, but more than likely, he usually scores enough to get you by, and there's usually a couple games, about 1 out of every 5 or 6, that Arthur Smith just gets a hair up his ass and does not really give him the workload and opportunity. Drake London, in weird game scripts, he doesn't hit, but some game scripts he'll go off, and he's a player you don't trust either, but the targets, the air yards can be his way as well. So a player you don't trust, but you might be putting in there anyways in your lineup. That being said, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Carolina Panthers. 37.5 over-under in this contest. Looking at this game, we're looking at another weird one. We're looking at the news here. We got some veterans here on the Tampa Bay side that you want to watch the news for. Right now, when I scrape the news together before doing this video, things seem positive, but I don't believe it. Adam Thielen, too, an older wide receiver, but 7 targets per game in his last 4 games. And you can throw it deep on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This might be a game you may want to be out there anyways. See if he can rack up some yards in a matchup that is advantageous for him, especially for DJ Chark's skill set as well. He's been practicing, so maybe he sees some deep balls. If he's at a limited capacity, I'm looking at you, Adam Thielen. Look at Terrace Marshall. More for DFS lineups if you want to be contrarian. Chuba Hubbard getting touches. Run backs. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. When I checked the news, when I looked at that before looking at this video, things seem good. Keep an eye on the news. They're older veterans. See what's going on with them. Rashad White should be getting opportunities. Running backs do well against the Carolina Panthers. He's out there. He's good to go. Jets at the Patriots. 30.5 over under. 30.5 over under. That says it all. That says it all. It says stay away from this game. Or look for players that could break. However, stay away from this game. You really only want Breece Hall here. That's the only player you're excited about. 65.4% opportunity share. Garrett Wilson, not 100% trustable, but you know he's going to get workload and targets. Pay attention to him. Run backs. Ezekiel Elliott. They don't have anything to prove with him. And maybe Ezekiel Elliott wants to prove himself for his next contract with another team. So he might be getting some looks. He's older. He might want to rest. Pay attention to that. Demario Douglas gets a lot of targets. Had 5 in his last game. And he gets a good target share. Very low ADOT. Can't trust him to win your matchup. But you know you're going to get some targets and might score enough to get you by. But you don't want this game. You don't want this game unless you're trying to be contrarian with your stacks. Cleveland Browns at the Bengals. 37.5 over-under. These over-unders have been low all year. We're seeing a lot in the 30s. We're seeing a lot this week because we've got some weird stuff going on with injuries, players sitting out, and everything, especially this week 18. That makes football kind of fun, though, because you're going to get some weird stuff going on. Browns at the Bengals. We got a thick spread here. Jerome Ford, 42.9% opportunity share over his last 4 games, getting workload, is scoring fantasy points, getting used in the passing game. He's explosive. Amari Cooper dealing with an injury. Watch that. Elijah Moore dealing with an injury. Watch that. Watch the Browns here. Watch how they maneuver their veterans. Run backs, Jamar Chase looks like he's going to be good to go this week. Joe Mixon, of course. T. Higgins, watch for him as well in the news. That being said, Jacksonville Jaguars at the Tennessee Titans. 41 over under. So compared to a lot of other games on the slate, that's kind of high. But in reality, that's kind of low. 3.5 spread here. Titans, a pass funnel defense. We've seen that all year long. So that could be advantageous for Calvin Ridley. We could be taking advantage for that. Travis Etienne should be getting workload. Teams have a little bit harder time running it on the Tennessee Titans per the stats for fantasy football performers. That being said, though, Travis Etienne probably good to go in the passing game. Run backs. Tajay Spears is going to get a look here, or should, because he's that rookie running back. He's very explosive, and they're probably going to be out Derrick Henry next year. And Derrick Henry needs to prove himself for that contract. So if he's getting workload and touches, he's going to go full bore. But that's if Tennessee wants to use him up this week. DeAndre Hopkins, we have to see, pay attention to the news on that. But Vikings at the Detroit Lions, 45.5 over-under. That's a high over-under for this slate. That's an over-under you're drawing fantasy players from for your lineups if you're doing DFS, if you're creating lineups and stacks. 3.5 spread, that's kind of tight. Pay attention to your starters here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 10 targets a game, almost a 30% target share. News was looking good last I checked, and it's been pretty recent. Gibbs versus Monty, I scrubbed the news with those guys as well. If something changes, I'll let you know in the comment section when I run past it, because I'm going to be checking the news off and on all weekend long. That being said, you're starting your usual guys from both teams until you hear that they're out, or if their workload's going to be impacted. Run backs, Justin Jefferson. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is, he's at least going to do something to get you by. That's it. He's at least going to do something to get you by. The running back position, quarterback situation is going to impact that. You're not going to 100% trust it. Ty Chandler's always going to have some upside. Seattle Seahawks at the Arizona Cardinals, 48 over under. Spread of 3, so it's a little bit tighter here. And Kenneth Walker's dealing with an injury. If Kenneth Walker's out, Zach Charbonnet versus the Cardinals. Running backs go off against the Cardinals. This could be his get-right moment if this happens as we go into the offseason. People look back at Zach Charbonnet and they see that he went off against the Cardinals, as all running backs tend to go off against the Cardinals. If neither of these running backs go off against the Cardinals, then more than likely one or both of those wide receivers down there, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, is going to go off against them as well. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to the news on the veterans, run backs. Due to what's going on in this offense, James Conner's the guy you want to look at. James Conner has been hot. He's been getting touches. He's been getting workload. Bears at the Packers, 45 over under. Decent. Kind of high for the slate, but decent in real life. Spread of 3. Bears at Packers, divisional rivalry. And the Packers are dealing with a lot of injuries. Aaron Jones is questionable. A.J. Dillon's dealing with injuries. If Jones is in, look for him to get workload and a good opportunity share. Jaden Reed dealing with injuries. Pay attention to him. Christian Watson, more than likely out. I saw that he's still dealing with that injury on Friday. I saw that recently in the news just a few minutes ago. Bo Melton's on the upswing. Good speedy 4-3 wide receiver. Romeo Doubs, roller coaster wide receiver no matter what. Go YOLO with that if you want to do that. Run backs, running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers. Hard to trust the Bears on any given week. But DJ Moore, watch the news on him. Watch the news on Khalil Herbert. They're probably going to suit up, but watch the news just in case. Rams at the Niners, and we got a 41 over under. We have a big storyline with this one as Elijah Mitchell is out. I'm going to have a unique video on Elijah Mitchell, going over him, whether or not you need him for fantasy football, really just going over the advanced metrics. But he should be getting the workload here in this matchup. Will he score enough to get you by? That's to be determined, but he is going to be getting workload. He is going to be opportunities, so you may want to just stash him if he's sitting there on waivers so he can't go against you, especially right now. If you got a bench guy you don't care about, swap it. just in case, since he's going to be getting workload. Debo, Brandon Ayuk, good to go. As I last checked the news, things could change. Pay attention to that. I'm going to reiterate that because people fast forward, rewind throughout this video, and they may miss that nugget. Run backs. Demarcus Robinson's been hot. He's been hot. Cooper Kupp's going to sit. Kyron Williams going to sit. Last I checked on the news. Puka Nacua, last I checked, there wasn't anything about that. I'm leery on that. Demarcus Robinson been running hot, though. Work with that with what you may. Cowboys at the Commanders, 46 over under. Huge spread in this matchup. The Cowboys trying to be dominant. They're trying to put that nail in the coffin in the division here. CeeDee Lamb, of course, is going to get those targets. 11.8 per game in his last 4. 33.6% target share. Jake Ferguson is always a good bet to get opportunities. Tony Pollard's always risky, but with how things are looking at right now, you may want to roll with him. Brian Robinson got some work last week. Should get some work this week. Not an optimal matchup, but again, looking at the slate here, you may have to roll with it anyways. Terry McLaurin might be a guy to look at. Curtis Samuel's dealing with an injury. Could be in, could be out. It's week 18. It's not like they're going to win the Super Bowl. Might be out. That being said, Chiefs at the Chargers. 35 over under. And that's because Patrick Mahomes is out. They're sitting everybody. Rashee Rice is dealing with an injury. More than likely going to be out. They're getting ready for the playoffs. Maybe Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Maybe some of those jabronis. Maybe Deneric Prince. Who is going to be running out there? Maybe you want to roll with that. But when we look at the Chiefs, there's nobody to trust either. Austin Eckler, nobody trusts him anymore. But he is pushing a 60% opportunity share over his last 4 games. Maybe we can roll with that this week, especially as he's trying to finish strong this season. Josh Palmer maybe getting some targets in this matchup. Watch for him in the news, though, considering it's week 18. Quentin Johnston. 6 targets last week. He's getting opportunities. Could be a sneaky guy. Look for some rookie to go off this week that we're not paying attention to. Maybe a Josh Downs. I know I did not talk about him when we talked about the Colts. Maybe Josh Downs, because he's been down these last 8 or 9 weeks. Look for him maybe to get a get-right game. But Quentin Johnston, pay attention to him just in case. Maybe not. Maybe not. But Broncos at the Raiders, 38 over under. It's sad this week. It's sad, but a fun time to set lineups because every time's a fun time to set lineups. That being said, Josh Jacobs is questionable. He might be good to go. He might be quite quitting. I'm not going to hate on him for what he's doing if he does, because Zamir White, baby, is good to roll, and you know he's going to get enough workload to get you by and put you over, at least get you by with a 10 spot or more. These last 3 weeks, 17.5, 14.5, 15.5. He's doing good for you, getting that workload, top 5 in opportunity share. Devontae Adams, watch the workload with him, though. Pay attention to that. Watch the news because he is an older wide receiver, and it's not like the Raiders are winning the Super Bowl this year. Run backs, Javonte Williams? Maybe. Jerry Jeudy? Quarterback play with Jarrett Stidham. Really. Cortland Sutton looks healthy. Is he going to roll? I don't know. I don't know what they're going to be doing this team. Looks like they might be trying to compete, or they're just trying to get by. Good luck trying to figure that out. Eagles at the Giants, 42 over under. That being said, we should see the Eagles roll a little bit in this one. Last I checked in the news, they want to get A.J. Brown more workload, which is weird because he got 5 targets in Week 17 against the Cardinals. But in the Giants game, 11, Seattle 10, Cowboys 13. So I do not know what they're talking about when I'm reading these headlines. But nothing is stated that they're resting these starters or anything. But that could change. Devonta Smith's dealing with an injury. Pay attention to him. DeAndre Swift might be a guy you want to look at. Run back, Saquon Barkley, as always with the Giants. Probably the only reliable, if you want to say that, on that team. Wan'Dale Robinson's been getting workload. You may want to look at him. Look at him and watch him play just in case you want to get him as a cheap option in next year's draft. Bills at the Dolphins. We're finishing up this huge slate that's on Saturday and Sunday here. 48.5 over under. Our only high over under on the whole slate. It's not even at 50 though. It's not even at 50. We got a tight spread. A lot of weirdness going on in this matchup. A lot of injuries on the Dolphins, but a lot of these guys is probably going to play. I don't know. Devin Chain might be in there. Mostert, watch the news. Tyreek Hill, we're seeing some news on him, but maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he gets a little workload in. We'll watch the news on him. Waddle's probably out. Everybody heard on the Dolphins. They might slow things down here. Run backs, James Cook, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis. Again, watch the news on Diggs. Watch the news on the veterans. Looks like they're going to be using their starters for a good bit here. Looks like they're going to try and compete against each other in this matchup. I could see why. But there's a lot of injuries on the Dolphins. They may want to just try and get right. They may. They may not. They may have to push things here. That being said, pay attention to the news on these Dolphins because they're dealing with a lot of injuries. James Cook, probably good to go. Stephon Diggs, probably good to go. Gabe Davis, up and down player, roller coaster player, but if I don't mention him, which I probably shouldn't mention him, I should probably stop mentioning him as a player, and that way he just hits his upside more. But that just probably wouldn't work out. That being said, those are the matchups for Week 18. Some of these teams are fighting for the playoffs, so they got to roll hard. Other teams are putting their foot on the brakes because they're trying to get right before they get into the playoffs. And there's a lot of teams right now who are hit with injuries because the season's long and it's rough. Let me know who you're trying to start in the comments below. Who's that jabroni player? Drop that in the comments. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on the way out. I want to thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.